Hey, Scott, it's Friday. It's time for another transformation conversation. We're up to episode 5, which is digital banking and cybersecurity. Will it stand up to meet new threats? And this is an incredibly timely topic, with the Colonial Pipeline behind us. And, it was in the American Banker the other day. The number of community banks have been impacted by cyber criminals. So, I guess the place to start is, what's different? Obviously, security isn't anything new. It's been around for a very long time, in our business. So I guess what's different is, I suspect that post-pandemic, there's been a pretty fair increase in, digital banking, remote banking, and growth in expansion of digital banking. So I think there's a lot more emphasis on that due to contactless banking. What else do you think is different?
Well, I think not just banking, right? Everything has gone online, communications, the email volumes. You have all sorts of different vectors, as we call them in the biz, of attacking, right? So multiple channels. People being more online than they ever were before, and people truly depending on being online, right? So of course I don't think necessarily that the attacks have become more sophisticated. In fact, most attacks that are prevalent are quite not sophisticated, if you will. So it's the standard stuff. It's the phishing, it's the this, it's the that, and just people falling prone to that. And because we're online more, and because we had to do that during the pandemic, and we're still kind of in the pandemic too, that's just made some of these vectors more prevalent and people more prone to susceptibility.
Sure. And I think the other thing that's kind of on the horizon that will have an even greater impact is the whole move towards real-time payments, because to my mind, that's when we move into an era of zero margin for error. We're into sort of time compression. Everything's going to be moving much faster. And I think that's going to put, even more of a spotlight on this. So
yeah, I would agree. And that of course comes into, knowing who the two sides are within a transaction, and how do I validate and verify that both of the sides of this transaction, they're good actors.
So does that really begin with the onboarding and enrollment of clients and companies and their users?
It really does, right? I mean, there's a lot of know your business, know your customer type companies out there, and it's important to know who these actors are, and understanding and onboarding the correct actors is just as important to, because that profile has to have a continuation through all of the banking services, whether or not we're initiating payments or simply going and looking at profiles, all the way into things like loan servicing and whatnot.
So over the years, a lot of banks have invested a lot of money in portals and single sign-on, and it almost seems to me that there are newer technologies for single sign-on that might be stronger, for lack of a better term, than what we've used historically. Is that the case?
It is tokenized authentication. So a lot of when I talk to people, it's more or less. I'm sure we've all been to websites where I can use my Facebook credentials to log into this, or I can use my Gmail to log into this. And that's a part of the open auth standard by which we can use things such as OIDC and federated authentication.
And open auth being open authentication, right?
Correct. Excuse me.
Okay.
OAuth, those types of things. You know me, I
Sure.
just throw out. Forgive me.
Exactly.
But it does a few things. First of all, when if you have multiple profiles hanging around all over the place, We've all, I got a password here, I got a password here, I got a password here. Oh, this one expired, that one expired. And, Google and standard browsers, Google Chrome and other standard browsers, now they go out and you have password managers that can go, hey, we've seen on the dark web that, your credentials have been compromised. You need to change all these things. And it's incredibly challenging for us as humans to keep up with all of that. And so more passwords we have flung all around all over the internet, the more susceptible we are to those being harvested and used to get into some of our profile.
Sure. So is a possible solution to have one centralized location, or one centrally accessible location, if you will, of user authentication tokens, from which to provide access, verified access into multiple systems?
Yeah, it does, and there's two pieces to that, right? The first piece is obviously, to mitigate what I just mentioned, as far as passwords being all over the place. But the other thing is also user convenience. So if I, as a business entity, just bringing it to where, our world,
Sure.
I authenticate into my business computer, and most likely I'm going against Active Directory or something corporate.
Right.
Now, more and more businesses are moving to the cloud. So more and more we're relying on AWS authentication, or we're relying on Azure or whatnot to log into those corporate resources. So really, our other systems should not be so terribly concerned with managing passwords and managing user IDs and those types of things. Delegated authentication, which basically means I'm going to log into my corporate domain, and from there, I can share my tokenized identity with all of these other systems. And it improves us by not having so many passwords. It gives you a great user experience, but it also adds to traceability. Back to what I was talking about insofar as how do I know who this actor is across all of these different activities that they'll be undertaking.
So they're all in silos today then, which
they are
decentralized and very hard to audit and control.
They are, and not just the authentication mechanisms, the entitlements. Now, mind you, you can't fall off the cliff. Certain fine-grained controls and entitlements in various systems, they do belong in those siloed places because they're only meaningful within that application's context. But macro or coarse-grained controls, as we like to call them, high-level controls, those are something that they should be not shared, but they should be in a central location.
Sure, and that's where I think, and I don't know that everyone realizes this, where consumer digital banking and commercial digital banking are very, very different in that regard. Because in consumer, online banking, it's a one-to-one relationship. You are who you are, and that's right. It. Whereas in the commercial context, you can have, a lot of different people in different roles with different levels of authorization and entitlements, and it can be fairly complex. And, you spread that out over multiple, user applications, and that sounds like an awful lot to manage. So,
it is, and just to comment on that too, what folks should keep in mind is it's not just about initiating a transaction or receiving a dollar amount or reconciliation and those types of things. It's also those approval steps where other third parties could be involved, and those third parties must be authenticated as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and I think we'll leave it there. I mean, obviously, it's a topic we can talk about for hours, if not days. But I think it's good to sort of scratch from the surface of this and start really thinking out a bit, especially again with real-time payments on the horizon. I think that's just going to put more sort of stress and strain on the security infrastructure that a lot of the banks do have. And again, for our audience, if you're watching this on our website, drop us a line at joe@prolificbanking.com or scott@prolificbanking.com. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, feel free to comment. Let's keep the conversation going. It's one again that's very timely and extremely important. Other than that, have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you next Friday for episode 6 of Transformation Conversations. Thanks a lot.
Happy Friday.